Hi Beats, it's EKG. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Welcome here if you are new. My name is Ebony, but I like to go by my pen name EKG. Today I will be going over some of my recent reads, but first off, I hope you are doing very well today. I hope you are enjoying the day or night wherever you are. Sending love always to you. I know the change in seasons, especially going into the fall winter, can be difficult for a lot of people. So I'm sending love. I'm right there with you. The darkness is hitting me, you know what I'm saying? But we're just gonna talk about books right now. And the first book that I want to talk about that I read for October for spooky season is My Sister the Serial Killer by Eileen Braithwaite. And My Sister the Serial Killer is about two sisters, one who is the older sister, Faride, and the other sister, Iola. And Iola is a serial killer. The youngest sister, who is a serial killer, is considered to be very charming and almost like a black widow when it comes to men, or a grasshopper woman. Don't female grasshoppers break off the heads of men that they mate with? So she's considered to be like that. The book first starts out with Iola calling Faride to come help her clean up for her most recent victim. Eventually, one of Faride's love interests becomes Iola's love interest, and some interesting dynamics ensue from that. I thought that this read was very perfect for spooky season. I thought it was very fast-paced. It is very, very short. I don't even think it's about 200 pages. However, I do think that the overall characterization and depth of this novel was missing for me, which is fine. It was a fast-paced read. I enjoyed it for what it was, but I just wished I would have gotten a little more characterization because I was finding it hard to see myself or relate to the characters, even though one is a serial killer, and if I related to her like that should be a little bit of a red flag. But I just wanted to connect with the characters a little more. But what I did think was interesting, I should mention that this book is set in Nigeria, and it does go into a bit of colorism within the society there. Specifically, the more attractive sister is considered fairer skin, and she's often pitted against her oldest sister, Faride, who is darker in skin tone. And I just thought that aspect of the book was interesting, as well as how beauty standards are shaped in a different society outside of the United States, which is just always refreshing for me to read. I just wish I got a little more substance from the characters, slightly more depth into the story. I think some of the scenes could have used a little fleshing out, and they really would have hit home. There's just such an interesting premise behind the story of a sister duo who one is a serial killer and the other one cleans up behind her. And that is my genre of shows that I like to watch. I'm a big Dexter fan, I'm a big You fan, and a lot more interesting things could have happened, although I do think that the stakes were presented to be fairly high when Iola becomes interested in Faride's one true love. That's all I have on that one. So let's talk about another slightly disappointing read that I read for spooky season, and that is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. Vivian, who at the time she is 19 years old, and in a fit of drunken, heartbroken rage, she and her cousin decide to hex her now ex-boyfriend, who decides to break up with her over the summer and move back overseas to Wales, where he has a woman waiting for him who he's betrothed to be married to. Vivian hexes Reese, who is her love interest, and years later he comes back to the town. Strange things start happening to him. They find out that Vivian's hex really did work. This novel follows Reese and Vivian's relationship as they try to salvage or rekindle whatever connection that they had when she was 19 years old. So the setting of this novel is very, very beautiful. I believe the name of the town is Glen Gleaves, in which it takes place, and it is such a homey Halloween town version of a town. You can just feel the fall Halloween energy radiating from the pages in the setting, and that is something that I was obsessed with and adored throughout the entire story. But my main issue here is that this book seemed to be doing too much. It was slightly unfocused in a sense that it was pushing on this relationship between Reese and Vivian, which they were only together 3 months, and he just leaves, and they're both really young, and now they meet again 9 years later. Also, the the stakes between trying to undo the hex on Reese and ultimately save his life. I just felt like if maybe one was focused or fine-tuned a little more, I would have rated this book slightly higher. I would have enjoyed it more, but I just found myself towards the end of the book trying to figure out what the point was. The ending was very like, oh, that's cute. And lastly, another book that I read for spooky season is Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh. I did dedicate an entire book review video, which is really just like me sitting and chatting to you as if we were two friends having a drink, catching up on some gossip. And that's how I reviewed this book. So you can check out that video. Just to give you a very brief synopsis, Eileen follows the main character, Eileen Dunlop, as she is working at a juvenile detention center, and she becomes extremely fascinated with a woman who starts working there, Rebecca, and becomes involved in a unsolved mystery case involving one of the recently admitted boys to the juvenile center. I actually really enjoyed Eileen. I love the writing, and I feel as though Otessa Moshfegh's writing performs the best for me, and I'm the most receptive to it when it is grounded in a longer narrative and not in short story format. I just felt very unsettled reading her short stories, but I was so engrossed in her grotesque writing of Eileen, and I love Eileen as a character. It's very iconic. There are so many quotes. She's funny, deadpan humor, and that's what I like. Okay, up next. Oh, I've read quite a few memoirs, which I don't know who I am anymore. I've been getting into memoirs recently, especially when I consume them with audiobooks. It feels like the author is just telling me a story, and I love that. You can really catch the tone and just how they feel about their work when they are the ones narrating their story. That doesn't really apply to this next book because I didn't read this on audiobook, but this is a work of fiction, kind of somewhat based on true events, by Eve Babbitt, and thank you, Carly, for recommending this. I love Carly Carly, and she raves about this book, so I wanted to check it out, and it's definitely a moment. This is just a collection of short stories that are somewhat fictionalized, and they follow Eve Babbitt's life living in California. This reads very much American Dream Girl, if you know what I mean. I was fascinated by the cowboy culture represented in here, as well as the beach and going to a Dodgers game, and it just felt very real. Like if I could live in the 1960s, this is what I imagined it to be. Eve Babbitt's writing is so funny, so witty, very engrossing, and very poetic at times. She really knows how to capture her environment and reflect the overall tone and mood of her story and what she's trying to say. That was really, really great to read. Eve Babbitt is a true hot girl. She did not want to marry anybody. She talks a lot about different relationships she was involved with, and it was overall a very, very fun read. Up next, I read one of my recent favorite authors of 2021, and that is Maggie Nelson's The Argonauts. This is a collection of auto theory, auto fiction. It is told in vignettes almost, the same way that Bullets is told, which is one of my favorite books. And Maggie Nelson chronicles her life trying to be a mother, conceiving, being married, being a queer woman and being married, and identity. And she uses critical theories to flesh out what's going on in her life, which I thought was so interesting, so big-brained energy, and it was just really, really interesting. I have not read anything that was this critical and intentional with the way in which it used literature and other studies surrounding identity, surrounding gender. And The Argonauts straddles along the lines of being very poetic, being very lyrical, and being disjointed, as well as following a story of Maggie Nelson. I just found that the writing style, I became lost a little bit at times. I have the physical book, but I listened to the audiobook as well, and that was Maggie Nelson narrating what was going on, which was very, very interesting. Once again, to hear her voice. I want to say a portion of this went over my head, but nonetheless, that's just me. That's me being weird. That's me not flexing my big brain energy, you know? But Maggie Nelson is a very brilliant very prolific writer, and if you have not read any of Maggie Nelson's work, I highly recommend that you do so. So next I'm going to mention a poetry collection that is What Is This Thing Called Love by Kim Ananizio. Details or muses on is love, but I thought it was just going to be strictly romantic poems, but it was also love poems to the body, it was also love poems to friendship and relationship and to the world. And one of my favorite poems from this collection is Eating Together. I know my friend is going, though she still sits there across from me in the restaurant and leans over the table to dip her bread in the oil on my plate. I know how thick her hair used to be and what it takes for her to discard her man's cap partway through our meal, to look straight at the young waiter and smile when he asks how we are liking it. She eats as though starving, chicken, dolmata, the buttery flakes of phyllo, and what's killing her eats too. I watch her lift a glistening black olive and peel the meat from the pit. Watch her fine long fingers in her face puffy from medication. She lowers her eyes to the food, pretending not to know what I know. She's going, and we go on eating. I love that poem. I just think it has very rich imagery, very tactile. You can almost feel and experience the sensations, so check them out. And last but not least, I read Being Lolita, which is a memoir by Allison Wood, and I want to thank Allison Wood very, very much for sending me over this copy, and Macmillan Publishing. This is the first time a publishing company or an author has ever sent me a copy of their book to review, which is very exciting. Thank you to them, and thank you to you guys for supporting me. And Being Lolita chronicles Allison Wood's relationship with an English teacher that she had in high school, who she refers to at times as the teacher, but whose name is Mr. North. And the time that Allison meets Mr. North, she is in a very vulnerable state. She was struggling with her mental health at the time. A creative writing professor notices her ability to write very beautifully and suggests that Mr. North will be a mentor for her, and we see how their relationship progresses and how he is very abusive and manipulative. Allison Wood's teacher is fascinated by Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and he frames their relationship as the greatest love story of all time, and he uses Lolita as a template to facilitate his abuse towards Allison. And so Allison Wood's writing is very easy to read, very digestible despite the heavy subject matter, which I thought was very, very helpful in terms of unpacking the story. And it was just very intriguing to read how this happened to her, and she uses not only analogies and metaphors, calls upon Lolita as a text to further dissect and evaluate what was going on in her own life, but she also mentioned Edgar Allan Poe's poetry and work and fascination with young underage girls in his writing, how Edgar Allan Poe literally married his 9-year-old cousin, and specifically an Edgar Allan Poe poem called Annabel Lee, which uses that. She uses fairy tale imagery as well, and one line that I thought was really, really potent is in chapter 12, and it says in the beginning, at what point does a man transform into a wolf? And then she closes the chapter and says, at what point does a girl turn into prey? Allison does a very great job of explaining what's going on in the text and giving you a summary so that if you have never read Lolita, you can understand her story. And I just thought that it was beautifully, beautifully done, and such a brave thing to share and a necessary thing to share, as there are many young girls, young women, and other people who can become conditioned to abuse. And her story was very important, not only as sharing what happened to her personally, but also analyzing how women, specifically young women, are portrayed in literature, and how the shaping and language and discussion around texts like Lolita, around texts like Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe, are often influenced by the male gaze and male dominance, and how that can be detrimental to young women. So I highly recommend that you read this. Ultimately, that's it. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to support me. If you would like to follow me any other places, it'll be linked down below. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.
And I was like, yo.